Welcome to Own It, the podcast where we talk to real estate thought leaders about embracing your strengths, taking your career to new heights, and owning your future.
I'm Hillary Saunders, co-founder, chief broker officer at Side, joined with my Italian co-host, Spencer Kroll. Now, how do you say Kroll in Italian?
Buongiorno. Well, Kroll, sadly, but you can call me Spencere if you wish to.
Very well, Spencere.
Spencere, sì.
Magnifico.
Magnifico. Look,
Right, there we
Jason
go.
coming in with the Italian. I love it. Well, welcome to the podcast, Jason Riveiro, one of my favorite pro-housing equality friends in the space.
Thank you.
I have a laundry list of your accolades, so I'm not even going to go down them, but I will say that you are the executive director of NAHREP.
Yes.
National Association Hispanic Real Estate Professionals.
Yes.
You also have this wonderful designation of being the NAACP Freedom Fighter Award winner.
I did a long time ago, yes.
That is the coolest. I was
almost-
going to put that right next to your name, like an ESQ at the end.
Yeah, that was awesome. It was actually, I feel like I reversed my involvement in volunteer organizations. I started really early, as opposed to, most people after they finish their career. And so I was on every board and I was very involved. And then finally after, I was like, oh, wow, I'm not making any money. So, and I got a kid on the way and stuff like that. So, you have to kind of change all that. But I love that. It was a huge honor. And so that was actually in Ohio. So a lot of the work that I did working with communities to bring together the African-American community and the Latino community to work together on issues.
That is impressive.
Yeah.
So bravo.
Thank you.
Another thing that I love is that besides sitting on multiple boards, that you were basically a prop tech advisor, and
Yes,
you have your
someone.
pulse on not just the housing industry, how things are changing with the NAR settlements, and how technology is changing too, but how we can utilize all of it together and really come together and find out who we all agree to be the end user, the people who we want to put under roofs and put in home ownership, and how do we ultimately help them?
Yes. No, it's fascinating. It's just recently got into this space about 2 years ago. We actually formed a partnership with NAR Reach as well, so really to support Latino prop tech founders. And so everyone was saying, oh, we can't find these individuals, but it was everywhere. And so it's mind-blowing to see all the talent that's out there and just the technology that's coming through that. And so as you know, you build your network out and then you start working with all these other tremendous VCs that are there to support diverse founders coming into the industry. And so I think the perspective I bring is we have a great association, and we also have we're focused on the leading home buying kind of demographic out there right now. And so if you're not thinking about it, we want to make sure that you're thinking about how you're serving Hispanic customers now and into the future. And so that helps, I think, having that conversation.
Do you find that this is a nationwide issue regarding to Hispanic buyers? Because I know, like in Houston, for instance, I used to work down in Houston, and there were a lot of Hispanic, Spanish-speaking
There's a few Latinos there, I think. Yeah.
But I'm saying, but that wasn't an issue there because
Yes.
there were agents that were in there that were already handling that space. Cincinnati, I would think it wouldn't quite be.
That's right. Actually, a lot of our growth, even as an organization, happens in these non-traditional markets. And so, yeah, there's certainly a need. I mean, I think it's not so much. I think it's easy to think of language as one of those primary ones. I think that's certainly an issue, but I think it's also there are cultural nuances to the community, and which still exists within Houston as well. And Houston's a great example. Actually, one of the leading cities with the most growth for Latino home buyers, right? And so makes sense. But I'm happy to jump into some of those kind of nuances as we're thinking about it, which will also have tremendous implications to the future of finance and the way that we do business, the way that we build, and the way we think of households.
So why don't we just address right now? So one of your colleagues, Mauricio, shared a very interesting, eye-opening stat with us at Side by Side a few months ago, which is that 70% of home buyers coming up will be Latinx.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the Urban Institute put out the stat back in 2021. So really their prediction is between now and 2040, 70% of net new home buyers, right? So you really have, and if you look at even people of color overall, it's probably more like 80%. And so you do have, it's very interesting where we are as a market right now, where you have 90% of sellers are white, and then 80% plus of home buyers, future home buyers are people of color. So that's really where we are as a country.
Yeah, well, there was a stat, I want to say it was in the 1990s when the census came out saying that white will become a minority in the country. I can't remember if it's by like 2040 or something, or 2030. I don't remember what year it was. Obviously, there are a lot of political divisions based on that, which we're not going to discuss here. That's not this podcast. But what I do find interesting is how little consideration is being given to different ethnic and cultural populations. So, for instance, getting a loan in the Islamic community requires
Sharia law,
especially Sharia law, and
sure.
What you do with interest,
yes.
and all that. And then what I was really surprised with working in Los Angeles in the Persian community, there are big, we look at things monolithically, right? So we always say, oh, it's the Hispanic community. Well, no, right? I mean, there are all these different cultures within it. Do you find that as a challenge as you're breaking into when you're talking about your growth is in different cities? Do you find that
we're really proud of this fact that usually that is the case, right? Where you have, an organization where you have a lot of Mexicans and Puerto Ricans and folks from Latin America. We all kind of come together around this organization, and as well, different political spectrums, right? So we, it's all, the whole shebang is there. But I think we're all equally passionate about the economic contributions of Latinos in the community, and also just growing ourselves in business, right? So that's our main focus. I mean, at the end of the day, we are consumer focused in terms of our mission, but if we can empower our agents and our members to become more successful themselves, then we know that makes an impact on the communities that they serve. So if you surveyed our members 10 years ago, it was very different than it is today. Now we did a survey last year and found that about 30% of our members have a net worth of $1 million. Right, and so that's because we've talked about wealth building, and we've thought about this holistically, and that's the same conversations we have with home buyers. It's not just a transaction, but I think that's part of the importance. And now is where everyone's thinking about, what's my value proposition as a buyer's agent is to really help you think of this as a long-term transaction, as a wealth building activity. What do you do? What are your next steps? And so I don't want to be too esoteric in this kind of stuff, but I do think if someone was to ask me, what are you most passionate about with the industry, is that I see in my mind, if we can get over this little thing called RESPA, but I do think that there is, the brokerage can be the center of all financial transactions in a way. I'm thinking, we all know ancillary and title; those are like the typical ones. But I'm thinking, how do you integrate better with tax? How do you integrate better with financial planning? Financial advisors and all those kind of things. It's really at the center of the brokerage, right? Our agents are really the most influential in providing referrals, and those that are successful already have those relationships built out, right? I mean, you have your network that knows how to serve your customers in the right way. If you're in the luxury space, you have the right people to connect your customer to, and the right contractors, all the same thing. The same thing happens in the Latino market. It's no different. It's just that the relationships that you have to help better serve that customer, right? So they understand the nuances of serving them. So I'll get off my
no. I love this high horse. Yeah. I think it's great. I think it's really important.
It's a good soapbox to be on.
Yeah.
I would love your take on the unseen or not talked about impact of the NAR settlement on your focus group.
Yes.
Right? Because I don't think a lot of people are actually giving voice to how this is actually going to harm unless there are massive changes in Freddie and Fannie and the buyer's ability to pay for buyer representation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we, unfortunately, like I think most associations or brands or companies in the industry really were kind of asleep at the wheel during this whole thing, right? I'm like thinking to myself, man, if we were only saying these things a year ago, you know what I mean? And so it really clicked on us late last year as things became more serious, as we know. And we thought, hey, regardless of what ends up happening, really take NAR out of the picture and two, think about the implications that will happen that are far greater than the fact that, well, what happens to the future of NAR, right? It's actually going to, there's broader ramifications to that. And that's really what we've been out there talking more about the impact to the consumer themselves, the impact to fair housing, the impact to transparency, all these different areas, the financing pieces to that, the impact of fair housing, right? I mentioned that. All of those touch points happen there. And when you have such momentum on our end, I talked to you earlier about just the juxtaposition between sellers and then buyers. Future buyers are the ones that are going to be in the market, and all of a sudden we're removing the system that's worked so well within cooperation, right? And not mention not just broker cooperation, but also even now clear cooperation's also coming under question, right? So this is what we're trying to raise kind of the awareness of that. So we've reached out to civil rights organizations like the Urban League. We've talked to all the GSEs, and of course we've spoken with the White House to make sure that people are thinking through and not just saying, well, we'll let the market figure it out. Right. And so there's two sides to that coin, and the losers are going to be the people with less resources, as in any kind of situation, and those that have the resources are going to do, I think, pretty well, even in the age of uncertainty.
Well, I think we just have to, call it as it is, which is if you are a buyer and you have limited funds and you can't afford your buyer representation, you will get the raw end of a deal. You will either pay more on the property because you just don't have the negotiation skills, or you will put yourself at some other disadvantage in some way because you don't do this every day. That's just reality.
I mean, look at our legal system, right?
It's our favorite analogy.
No, I was going to go there.
Right. That's those that have the best attorneys usually end up in the best situations, and I think that's unless you're going to get some sort of public defender. I don't know. That's really bad.
Well, and then that begs the question: did the attorneys do a good job during the settlement? And I will be the first attorney to say no. I think they flatly failed.
Mm-hmm. I think you
watch
you
they
brought
come
up
after me
something.
with pitchforks.
No, there are so many other people with in front of you. I think that they're coming after. But you mentioned something earlier, which I think dovetails with that. When we were talking, you were saying who's your end, who's your customer, right?
Yes.
So from the brokerage perspective, which is what we talk a lot about, is about how we're going to empower the agent. And I think your arguments on everything in that, it's how are we empowering the client? That's the argument to make to Fannie and Freddie.
You have to change the narrative. Think about it from, I think, the mom's test, right? Or is that what if they hear it out there in the news, any random person, they read the Wall Street Journal, they're like, well, that makes sense. Why am I having to pay for this, right?
Mm-hmm, right.
But if you pose it really the impact to the consumer, because right now what it's been is protectionist. It's been about, the commissions, and no, forget about the commissions. Think about what the implications to the home buyer is, and that the importance of having fiduciary responsibilities, that everybody has their own representative, is so important in the transaction. Yeah. Looking out for your best interest.
Well, and you were just saying, you want to sell your home, person who's reading the Wall Street Journal, you better make you better start getting vocal about arrangements so that these people can buy your home, right? So that they can buy it, you can sell it, and I think that's such it's such an important leap, again, because we keep just talking about the agent, and the commissions. There will be a new business model, obviously, where we will be serving the end client, right? So as a brokerage, we'll be serving our client, the agent, in order to help them serve the end, the end user.
Yes.
It's when you were talking to the White House and you were saying you've been talking to government entities. Do they have any ideas? Is there anything that they're talking about, or are they also, were they found as flat-footed as the real estate industry?
No, I think that there is an understanding. I think that's why you've seen some of the statements put out in terms of clarifying from some of the GSEs and even, FHA. So they're all very aware of it. I think what will end up happening. So if the DOJ steps in, they'll probably look to the CFPB to, provide kind of the rules of the game and how that will all work out. But I think, as I've talked to some of the fair housing organizations as well, there needs to be a study in terms of the impact, right? the disparate impact of these issues, and that hasn't happened yet. I think that's something that we need to put out there.
I want to do a little bit of a shift and talk migration
Yes.
and where people are moving, because one of the most interesting studies that I read recently was based on climate migration.
Yes.
Right? And you've got a lot of the Latino population who is immigrating are coming from warmer climates to, the warmer parts of the U.S. in general. Are you seeing any migration north to, like, you're in Cincinnati?
Yeah, I think a lot of the migration happens to be just economic driven, obviously, and the propensity to move to different cities is a big part of that. I think Latino households are more apt to move and to relocate. So yeah, certainly that's where our growth is as an organization. That's where the need usually tends to be. And so Latinos right now currently are the most impacted by affordability because they tend to live in the most expensive urban environments, right? If you look at the cities where we're most likely to live in. And so these options have become much more open. And it's funny to me as well just to see folks within our membership that are in California, and they're asking me about Ohio and investing in Ohio. And so I know a few people that, that are,
we're going to have this conversation after this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but I feel like we're at this point where like there's no place that's hidden anymore, right? There's no safe spot. I feel like everyone's just like, oh, it's cheap over there, let's buy.
And you said you're working with a lot of other organizations. I don't know if you're still working with NAACP or if you just
No, we haven't talked to them about this specifically. Like I've mentioned, we've met with the Urban League to kind of bring this issue to their attention. Mm-hmm. We've met with some legal defense funds as well that serve the Latino community to make them aware of the implications, because it is fairly nuanced, right? And so once you paint the picture, it all makes perfect sense at the end of the day.
Well, I think it's going to take a real ground root effort. But a lot of communities, we have people that work with the Asian real estate community, and where that was built up mainly through building wealth with investments. And I know a lot of people that we've spoken to also within the Black community about explaining home ownership and building wealth that way, because these things have been held at such a distance, right? I mean, they've been prevented with redlining, everything from having these things. I think it's just one of these things.
Well, and this will accentuate that, right? So if you're thinking about lack of transparency, or, in fair housing, there's several protected classes, right, as you know, and I think income-based discrimination is probably very prevalent. One of the conversations that I have with networks like yours, that have a broad network of agents, is that you're really the front line of what fair housing is, right? I mean, it's not like people think, oh, well, there's a government statute and HUD is taken care of. No, you're really the enforcement people, right? Like, if it isn't for your calling things out, no one's going to report this stuff, right? And so we need more of that to be called out. And I think income-based, it happens, but it's not as maybe thought of as normal. But now I think that was going to be further accentuated, like you said, in terms of, all right, we got people ready for financing, but now they got to come up with them. So if I'm a seller, I'm looking, here's the cash offer versus this person that we still don't know where, their situation is. Can they afford representation? I don't know. I mean, who are you going to go with?
But this just popped into my head from what you were saying. All right, so if there's a groundswell, or there's these coalitions that are being built of people that are really being disparately affected by this, and how can the real estate community jump in and be part of that to help lead the charge, right? Because with NAR, one of the reasons NAR is such a powerful, or was such a powerful organization, is because of the lobbying efforts that they have. The direct line to Congress and with state institutions. What better way than, hey, let's form this coalition?
But that was I think where the industry fell asleep.
Yeah,
is that we left it all to NAR.
Right.
We left fair housing to NAR. We left these kind of things to NAR, and none of our members were involved. It was just the people that were elected committee members, right. And all of a sudden we're all like, oh, wow, I didn't know about this. So I think this also elevates the fact that each brand, each company needs to have their pulse on what's happening in legislation in their local markets. Mm-hmm. How do you mobilize people? Top producers, you should also be involved. I know you're too busy, but it's going to impact your bottom line.
Well, I think this goes back to one of our favorite topics, which is that we really want the people who do not see this as a career and a passion to move aside, move into referral status, get out of the way, and let the people who love and breathe this every day and are so committed to fair housing and home ownership, which tends to be the top, brokers that are doing multiple transactions a month versus the 1 to 2 a year. Like the 1 to 2 a year are the ones that are crying over, not understanding the importance of a national organization to provide that. But to your point, you're 100% right. We need, from a ground level, to make our voices heard, local news, statewide news, and call it out and say, this is going to hurt the end consumer.
Yes.
Let's figure out a path forward to make sure that they're better served and we eliminate the perceived issues that were there.
Yes.
The fair housing stuff, though, also has always just been on the side. It's like, now we've just put on this requirement. You have to take fair housing if you're going to get licensed again, right? So you have to take this. And here's this Fair Housing Coalition through NAR. Those people, like you were saying, let them deal with it. I think that we need to bring that now to the forefront. And that's the only thing that's going to change the industry and make it so that, agents can make a living,
yes,
but also can help. And I love the idea you were saying when you compared it to financial advisor, because we are right there. And the good agents, the argument is we're going to help you build wealth. We're going to help you maintain wealth. We're going to bring this new, the next generation up, your kids in terms of buying. And I'm sorry, do you see me getting impassioned about this?
You are about to jump out of your chair.
I am. And I've only had 1 cup of coffee so far today. So this is real. This isn't caffeinated.
I love it.
So let's talk about your podcast, because you are trying to shine more of a light as best you can on multicultural.
Well, now you just called me out because I need to get back to doing it. I did a whole bunch of, I did a lot of podcasts around just a lot of things. Like I did a whole thing around like Sharia law, and so just different things that maybe that are not top of mind for most people in terms of some of those cultural nuances. It was it wasn't just focused on the Latino market. It was really multicultural and broad-based. But I'm really passionate about demographics as a whole. I think that's one of those areas within business planning that I feel the real estate industry has not necessarily tapped into their strategic planning metrics. What I mean by that is I come from a retail and even consumer goods standpoint where the level of research and sophistication is much further advanced, right? And so you have people that are solely dedicated to looking at segmentation of consumers, their buying habits, all this kind of stuff, and help you really predict what's happening in the future. And demographics are a huge driver of that. I say this often, is that we're very focused on the here and now as an industry, and then we don't look at the trends. Especially the demographic trends. So even within our own communities, things could be changing, and we're not paying attention to those changes because we're in our routine. We're selling and to the same people, and we're working with the same people. But all of a sudden, whether it's generational or gender or income based or racial or ethnic changes, they're happening all around us now. And is your firm set up to have that? Do you have the right talent? Do you have the right marketing? Do you have the right messaging, the right products? All those kind of things are a big part of that. So I think that needs to be included more in the conversation, not from a standpoint, because I'm not a D&I expert. I kind of got put into that as a result of things happening in the industry. And sometimes when you're like, oh, I'm Hispanic. Oh, well, then you're probably also very good at D&I, say it happens to folks, if you're a black person in a company, oh, well, you should be part of our D&I efforts. But it's really, for me, it's about the marketing, the business, and the metrics there. There's a lot there. There's a lot of opportunities from the consumer standpoint. And the retailers, they get it, right? So many years ago, it's already 10 years ago, the CMO at Walmart has said, hey, 100% of our net growth is coming from multicultural markets, right? You look at companies like Procter & Gamble, they're so focused on that in terms of what they do and how they develop. And it's also, if you look at also popular trends that happen, like Nielsen does a tremendous study that they do in terms of the impact of multicultural trends within our own tastes, whether in music, in food, all these kind of things. And one interesting stat that I saw, it was that on Netflix, most of the people that watch Korean soaps are not Koreans. It's actually, not, non-Hispanic whites, so there's, other segments that are much attractive. And that's because there's we're a melting pot, right, of a lot of different cultures. And so you can predict a lot of things if you also look at demographics, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of it is just the exposure and familiarity with it. And but I think you can't just look at it. It's not just one size fits all, right?
Absolutely.
So when I was an agent, active agent when I was starting out in Beverly Hills, when I had a Persian client, I partnered with a Persian agent, right?
Yeah.
Because there were just cultural nuances. I had the same thing. I had a client from Morocco, and I found had a Moroccan agent that I was working with. Great story for another time. But that said, I think that we have these segments, right? Of I'm an agent from this group, and I'm only going to work with these people, or I'm the one that always gets these deals, and so on. So there has to be so much more networking, just within both the. I think with the industry as a whole, there's just so many pieces. We have to come together like that old Coke commercial from the 70s, and put our arms around each other.
No, and I feel bad. I think that's what's a great thing about like platforms like Side, that you allow people, and I think that's really the revolution of things is if you look at we used to look at things from like the broker. It's like the time clock of a broker, right? And everything that they would do. And it's like you have to be everything, right? You have to be knowledgeable in marketing, accounting, all these kind of things. But as technology gets better, ultimately, like platforms like yours are helping individuals specialize better and also focus on the right things, as opposed to these things that are kind of holding you back that aren't revenue producing, right? They're more administrative type of work, So I think that's hopefully what ends up happening. People can become much more aware of abilities to work across different cultures.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to dive into, and so much that we can hopefully all tackle together in the next 6 months to a year as this all shakes out. But would love to get a couple takeaways from you. What can our realtor community do to get involved, to really push either their local, their senators, whomever? What can they do tactically to really make their voice heard in the issue of home ownership and basically what can be hurtful to the end consumer?
Absolutely.
If this plays out wrongly?
I think that the basis of clear cooperation or wherever you're passionate about, you want to focus on, is that you have the ability to convey a real personal story. That's what people want to hear. I think that's what we tell our members as we go to the Hill and we visit our representatives, is tell your personal story. You don't have to be a policy wonk. You don't have to know all the intricacies, but know that this is what I do, right? Our national president, she is so passionate about first-time home buyers. She did tremendous. She did about 175 transactions, all 90% on the buyer side of things, and because that's what she's passionate about. And time again, anybody that knows is that you as a buyer side representative are sacrificing a lot of things, and you're working much longer. I mean, let's face it, it's easier to probably list than it is to work with first-time home buyers, right? And so, and at times, hey, I'll have to give part of my commission just to close this deal. At the end of the transaction, if something failed. So I hear these stories time and time again. That's what needs to be conveyed, and that's what makes it real in terms of the impact to the first-time home buyers. But again, going back to my other point, as I said, I know companies shy away with it because of in terms of issues around advocacy. But I think that if your own affiliated members and agents come together and say, hey, we want to have our own campaign and we want to write our letters, you're all business owners. This is what I love about this industry. Is in any other industry where people are advocating, it's usually these big hegemonic companies. Real estate is made up of small, independent, or companies. Even the biggest ones here, as we talk about market share, if you add up all the big brands, they don't make up 50% of real estate transactions. It's very, very spread out.
I think one of the things that we have to do as an industry then is let people know, what can I do?
Yep.
How can I get involved? Yep. Because it's a great idea. Where do you go from there? And I think that's organizations like yours are really important for that rate.
Consider joining NAHREP, ARIA, NAHREP, the Alliance, wherever your passion is. Find your people and make your voice heard. Thank you, Jason, so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
This is great. We'll do it again for sure. Thank you.
Excellent.